biggest scam is the money scam, the ability to print fiat money. If you did it, you'd go to jail, but the banks can do it. And then they're saying your number one job is to protect the planet because civilization and the environment are mutually exclusive. That is complete.
This is our discussion with Senator Malcolm Roberts.
Temperatures today are not unprecedented. Why do you talk over me when I come up with a fact like that? Well, when I first started on this climate scam, I've been taught that science is the basis of engineering. And when I realised that they were telling us that carbon dioxide from human activity was destroying the planet, I went, because... So the constant battle is not left versus right. That's a distraction, that's a lie, that's a diversion. The battle is better looked at between freedom and control. And always beneath control, by the way, there is fear. What are they afraid of? Well,
what was the bill? What happened with the voting? And why did you abstain from it?
Okay. First of all, you're spreading misinformation.
What's up, guys? Welcome to this very special episode of Unemployable. This is our discussion with Senator Malcolm Roberts. He is a federal member for One Nation. It was a really insightful chat. We covered a lot of stuff. If you don't know anything about Senator Roberts, he is a very controversial figure in Australian politics. He does not believe in climate change. He is very vocal about immigration. He's very vocal about our energy and how we are giving it away for literally nothing. He is very vocal about our overspending and waste as a nation. He's very vocal about what makes great children and great parenting. And I think you're going to find this really interesting. We talk about free speech. We specifically spoke about why he and Pauline Hanson abstained from the recent hate crimes bill and so much more. I think you're going to really enjoy it. It goes a lot of directions over the course of nearly 2 hours. Make sure you like and subscribe. Put a comment below as well, guys, because engaging with this kind of media helps people of power and influence like Malcolm know that the attention is now in places like this podcast, independent media. We are not paid. We don't have sponsors. We fund this ourselves. And so, your engagement shines a light on where they should go and be heard. So with that said, please enjoy this discussion with Senator Malcolm Roberts. What is up, everybody? Welcome to this very special episode of Unemployable. This is our second ever political interview. The first one went absolutely nuts on YouTube. Don't mean to brag, but we outperformed both of the major parties by bringing in none other than Senator Pauline Hanson, who at the time of this recording has gone to nearly 200,000 views on YouTube, absolutely blitzing any other political interview in the podcast space this cycle, which is really, really encouraging. And today we have with us Senator Malcolm Roberts, who is also with One Nation. Now, just for the record, guys, we have invited Albo on, we've invited Peter on, we've invited in a couple of independents. We do have Gerard Rennick coming in as well. So it's not that we are just playing One Nation. We happen to be very receptive to One Nation's message. And I think all Australians leading into this election should be absolutely opening their minds and listening. And that is the point of these long form podcasts.
Yeah, the listeners have been great, and the comments on Instagram and whatnot have been great in suggesting guests as well. So if anyone, we put the message out to Dutton and Elbow, but if anyone has a contact to them, let them know.
I'd really like to talk to them as well. I've got a few hard questions. I don't think they'd like to come on here because they're not going to be softballs, let me tell you that. But Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you for coming in. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Welcome.
Well, thank you for the welcome. And I first of all want to say how much I appreciate the new independent people's media, the truth media, the freedom media, because the other two forms of media, the anti-social media, social media, is really antisocial and it's censored. And the other one is the globalist, mouthpiece, big brother media, whatever you want to, it's owned. So this is the only way we can get our voice out. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah. One thing I noticed as soon as you walked in the studio just now, and this is what gets lost in media of all kinds, we sit in a very privileged position here on the panel being able to meet politicians face to face.
What's privileged about that?
Well, what I mean is I get to look you in the eye.
Oh,
a lot of people just see through a lens. And when you meet Malcolm, for the listeners and those who are on Spotify, he looks you dead in the eye and he keeps your gaze. And that's something to be said for that. And a firm handshake. And I love that in people generally. I got the same from Pauline, and it's refreshing. So I'm sure this pod's going to be good because I've watched a lot of your clips. I've watched you go into Senate hearings, and I've watched you battle it out on the floor of Parliament in Australia. And I'll say to you the same thing I said to Pauline, which was thank you, because we need people like you who are prepared to sit there. And I've watched the smug look on these politicians' faces as you grill them thinking this guy's just a conspiracy theorist extremist, and they're kind of dismissing you. And I watch how you just let it go off your back and you just keep pushing them on the facts, on the point, and you won't let it go. And I think the tide is turning, and I think Australians more than ever are secretly laughing at the politicians who are looking down their noses at you, even though you're a politician, but looking down their noses at you dismissively, like, when is this clown going to stop talking? And the Australians watching are going, Malcolm, keep going, keep pushing these guys, because so much trust has been lost in the last few years that I think there's more swing vote now than there has been for a long time. What's your feeling out there in the electorate as you go out and talk to people?
I get constantly bombarded wherever I go. Thank you for what you're doing, and which is really disturbing in a way, because they mean it, and they're saying keep going. But for someone to thank me for doing my job, that shows a few people are doing their job. So it's very encouraging, of course, but people definitely are starting to see that the two title parties, the uni party is really just that. They're not alternatives. They're both pushing the same basic policies: immigration, energy, climate. The same bullshit's coming out of both of them.
It's really interesting because Mark Burris, who has more subscribers, Yellow Brick Road has more subscribers than the Unemployable pod does, had Elbow and Dutton on. I think the Dutton podcast got 60,000 views and the Elbow podcast got 20,000 views on YouTube, just YouTube. And ours, I think, is sitting at about 200,000 views with Pauline.
Mm-hmm.
So
with 1/10 the subscriber base.
With 1/10 the subscriber base. So yeah, talk us through that a little bit more. Is it come down to people's just frustration with the two major parties, or how do you see it?
The vote overall for the two title parties, if that's a graph, has gone from 95% for the Labor and Liberal a matter of a few decades ago to now 65% and falling. Mm-hmm. People are swinging. They're starting to wake up. It used to be the days that, I just go in, which one? Labor's not doing a good job, I'll vote for Liberal. Liberal's not doing a good job, I'll vote for Labor. But now they're starting to wake up and really start looking at independents as minor parties.
Well, I didn't realise that it swung that
well, we've got a government, Mark, in Albanese's government, Labor government, that has got less than a third of the vote. Less than a third of the vote. And what people don't realise is that they're in cahoots. That's in the lower house. In the Senate, they're in cahoots with the Greens, which are the most destructive force in this country. And they have to buy off a couple of independents every now and then to get things through the Senate. We've had 205 bills dragged into the Senate and guillotined. No debate. Or debate shut. Albanese is not a democratic Prime Minister.
I'm pretty interested in politics, I must say, and I had no idea that he only had 1/3 of the vote.
Just slightly under 1/3.
Interesting. There's so much I want to dive into, and I know from the comments that we've gotten when we've said we've got you coming on and since Pauline's come on, the number one thing that we're getting at the moment, and we won't address it now, we'll address it at the right moment, but for the listeners, because I know they're sitting there going, ask him that. Why did they refrain from the free speech vote, that Bill went in and didn't vote against it? We'll get to that in a minute.
Sure.
So if you're listening,
I'd love to get to that.
Yeah. So don't worry, guys. We are going to cover that. But I want to set this interview up before we get into the meat and potatoes, because I think it's really important to get some context about you. You were born in Africa, right?
India.
India. My mistake. Yeah. So born in Bengal, wasn't it?
West Bengal.
Yeah. India. And you grew up a son of a coal miner. You were a coal miner for a period of time. So maybe just give us that. And you're an engineer by profession. So maybe just give us that little bit of early background, because what I want to understand, I've watched you on many, many clips, and you've got a dog in you that's really strong, and I love that. Right?
I'm being called a dog now.
But you know what I mean?
No, I get it. Thank you for that. That's a compliment.
That's what I mean. I mean, absolutely as a compliment. Like you are very, very strong on your opinions, and I'd like to understand where does that drive come from? And I suspect it's from a lifetime that's now here in your political career, but where are these beliefs forming, and what led you to align yourself fully with Pauline? Where's that fire coming from?
Okay, I'll have to remember all of those parts of the question. I don't know where the drive comes from. I was born with it. When I was under one, I think I was being taken in Wales with my father's parents, my grandparents, and apparently Mum and Dad used to take me down a road and they'd take the right fork. This is less than one. And my grandparents took me for a walk one day and they took me down the left fork and I went other way, you know. Wow. So I'm not afraid to speak up. I get a bit nervous, like I'm nervous now. So I still get nervous when I speak in the Senate. But it's like Pauline. The thing is that Pauline does not like fighting. She doesn't like a fight. You can tell it in her voice. I mean, she has the first 30 seconds of she's nervous, speaks up with a high pitch, but then she relaxes into it. There's one thing worse than a fight, and that's running away from a fight. And so that's why we're both tentative in the sense that we're not relaxed doing that, but we tell the truth and we've got to do it because I just can't live with myself if I don't do it. So that came from my parents, I think. What else?
How did you grow up? Like, did you grow up where did you grow up?
The formative years, Maria Montessori, who's the most powerful, the most eloquent. She's dead now, but she died about 85 in the 50s, I think. She was the most comprehensive understanding of human development and human behavior. And she said the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6. Mm-hmm. So my formative years were spent in India, and I mixed with Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, probably atheists, Christians. So it didn't matter where I was, I would talk to people and listen to them. So the other thing that my mother taught me is that it's very important to listen first. So we listen. And the other thing my father taught me is to be calm and factual. There's no point in going off at people. It doesn't do any good. The strength comes from how you address the issue, not on what label you use and not on what abuse you give them. And Pauline's much the same. So my approach is calm and factual. Let the lunatics do all the raving, carrying on. When they're finished, I'll still be here. Now, what have you got to say? So I've used that with industrial relations. One of the things that surprised me, I graduated as a mining engineer, and then I decided I better go and learn something. So I worked as a coalface miner. I mean that sincerely. I learned more as a coalface miner because mining is about people and it's about different conditions underground. And conditions can change from like working in a car park, a parking station, really safe, to treacherous within a meter. And sometimes we don't even know it. So you've got to rely upon people, and you've got to develop in people the skills and the accountability to take responsibility for themselves. And that means letting go. So I don't believe in micromanaging. I believe in setting standards, laying down my expectations, and then making sure that people can do their job. Get out of their way, because that's the problem with a lot of managers in Australia. We're rambling a bit here, but a lot of managers in Australia want to tell people how to do things, and they miss the talent. And I guess that's the other thing, that I'm very, very pro-human. We've had our dickheads, we've had our authoritarian rulers, Hitler, Stalin, Maurice Strong, who you might want to ask about, Chairman Mao, Morrison, Palaszczuk, these lunatics. And I mean that, they're lunatics. But the majority of people are absolutely wonderful. Humans are wonderful, and the overriding traits in people are care. You're only here because you care about what's happening to our country, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to do something about it, and you want to give voice to the majority. So humans are absolutely wonderful, and I've learned, from my mother, I suppose, that's the case. So we can't trust everyone, we can't rely on everyone, but we've got to extend to them an opportunity to use their talents. And that's something that I found very, very important. And I love, when I was managing West Wall's End mine, when I arrived, it was in turmoil industrially. Every night, the evening shift would have a stop work meeting and decide whether or not they'd go home or stay at work. And I thought, wow, this is strange. Then I realized the previous manager was telling lies. So they didn't trust us. So it took a lot of time for me to go underground, be with people. You can't run a mine from the surface. So one day, after about 18 months there, I was walking out to the car park just on dark. And I remember just thinking, why am I happy? And I turned around behind me and looked at the coal stockpiles, record coal stockpiles, record production, safety statistics that were really, really very, very powerful. And I thought, it's not the record coal, it's the fact that people come to work, get changed, put their mining gear on, and go down the mine and come back out. And not always lack of argument, because we still had our arguments, but they trusted. And people, when they're allowed to do their job, they love doing their job. People are just wonderful.
But it relied on leadership not to lie to them.
Yes, and it's not, leadership is not about just saying, do whatever you want. Leadership is about saying, here are the expectations I have for you, and quite often developing those expectations together. But ultimately, I'm representing the shareholder, I'm in charge of the mine, and I draw a line because we did have, when I first arrived there, we did have union delegates who they didn't trust anyone. I had to have meetings with 10 delegates in the room because there were 5 unions. They didn't trust each other, and each union had to bring 2 people because they didn't trust their mate. So that was the level of trust. Yeah, it's shocking. So there were a couple of times when I had to say, that's it. We'll take it to court. And sometimes we just, some people, I'd sack someone. And for example, we sacked 8 people. And after 6 months, all for good documented reasons. And after 6 months, the mechanical engineer came to me and said, I didn't know you could sack people in the mining industry. If you have a reason and you give them notice, and they don't respond, of course you've got to. So it's a matter of building trust. And the union delegate in charge of the lodge, that's the branch at the mine, he actually was up in arms within the first 6 months, trying to intimidate me. So I didn't yell back, I didn't scream, just calm down. When he saw me just being calm, he would deflate like a big bag. And then he was like putty. But he was a good guy. But he had a terrible reputation. And then 2 years later, we went through massive retrenchments in the Hunter. And he came to me and said, what do you need? And we made some major changes that he got into trouble from with his national delegates. So it's just stunning, because that's what happens when trust comes. But you've got to have the standards in there, and you must be prepared to enforce those standards. But you do it responsibly.
A politician who's worked outside of Canberra, that's amazing.
Well, Pauline's worked outside of Canberra.
I know.
I was just about to say, trust and leadership is such an important topic, and sometimes when we previously spoken about politics on this show before having a politician on, people would say, why are you talking about politics? We're tuning in because this is a business show. And I think what people sometimes forget is that running a country is the biggest business in your economy. The American government is the biggest business in their economy. The Australian government is the biggest business in our economy. And sometimes it's being run by people who don't have business experience or don't have the trust of the nation. And that's what we're seeing at the moment. You're seeing the Elon Musk thing. I mean, that guy is the world's richest person ever by a long shot. Not because he's stupid. He must know something. And he's getting demonized. And it's like, we had a couple of people in the comments on the Pauline clips say, ask her how her mate Jean is going. And it's like, why do we have that mentality where we're trying to tear down those partnerships? I mean, don't we want the best and the brightest and the most successful to help in whatever way possible, even if it is people who've had previous business experience coming into politics? Don't we want that?
Boy, there's so much in that, Mark. I strongly disagree with you that government is a business. Governments should be there to create the environment so you can go and invest and do your job. That's what it is. What we've got now is governments in control. And governments have long been, whether they're democratic or monarchs, monarchy or republic, and we are basically a republic, but I diverge and come back to that. Governments have long been a source or a vehicle for people to control others, whether they're in government themselves or whether they're puppets for people outside. Our country is being destroyed. It's not being governed. It's being destroyed. And so that you're right that most people in politics don't understand business. They don't understand that you have to create an environment. You know that if you create a shitty environment, your people won't respond. But I turn up to work, you turn up to work, everyone turns up to work with a heart, a mind, and a pair of hands. And that's basically the physical, the mental, and the spiritual or emotional. And you've got to get people engaged. And how the hell can investors get engaged in this country and create new employment when they're having their electricity sector destroyed in front of their eyes? And based on a lie. How the hell, when government comes in and mandates so many things that are destroying our productivity and destroying our productive capacity, how the hell can you get investors? What happens is you get foreign investors in because they're not paying tax. Many of them, they're not paying company tax. So you, as a family person, I assume you're a family person, you're paying tax to keep these bastards here. And you know, the government, so I'm rambling a bit, but government is not a business. Government is an enabler and should get the hell out of the way and create the environment, create the tax. The most destructive system in our country is the tax system.
So if you don't like the analogy that the government is like a business, what is the answer to allowing government to more properly govern?
Government has three basic responsibilities, three basic roles: protect life, security; protect property, again, security in a form; and protect freedom. Because one of the things that is really one of the things that's really disturbing me is that, well, I'll tell you a story. I've been chasing this climate fraud since 2007. And I went around the country, quite often met up with Bob Carter, who's dead now, but he was a professor, climatologist, paleoclimatologist, wonderful man, retired, doing this work voluntarily, just like I was. And one day he said to me in a break, "You know, mate, this is the biggest scam ever." And I said, "Bob, it's not even close." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "It is a big scam, but a far bigger scam is the money scam, the ability to print fiat money. If you did it, you'd go to jail, but the banks can do it." So he said, "Oh, yeah, you got a point. There's no doubt about that. That's a much bigger scam." And I said, "But there's a bigger one. That's the anti-human scam." The Club of Rome in 1960s started pushing the anti-human scam. They did it subtly and by saying, your first duty is to protect the planet. And everyone went, "Oh, yeah." It's not. Your first duty is to enhance your species, contribute to your species. And the species, first of all, we must realize the truth about species, our species. Our species is not lazy, incompetent, dishonest, irresponsible, uncaring. We are the complete opposite in all of those things. I'm starting to get a bit head up because it's passionate. We are destroying these people. From this age, we're telling them they are incompetent, dishonest, lazy, irresponsible. Their species doesn't care. Got to protect the planet. So that's destroying the future leaders of our country. And then they're saying your number one job is to protect the planet because civilization and the environment are mutually exclusive. That is complete bullshit. If we want a future as a civilization, we have got to protect the environment. If we want to protect the environment, we've got to have civilization. You go to any country in the world, Mark, and you will find that the countries that are developed have a cleaner environment and are more aware of protecting the environment. And so it's not a matter of saying environment or civilization, because some of these people who are pushing climate fraud want us back in the dark ages. It's a matter of saying we want both because they're mutually dependent. And so your job is to enhance the human species, that as a member of our species. But to do that, you have to protect the environment. So what I'm saying is it should be a very positive, very wonderful message, and yet our kids are being bombarded, our adults being bombarded with decades of bullshit about how we're a bad species.
There's so much in that, but it's you can just see when you've got the kids destroying artwork and tying themselves to different things and
cutting bits of pieces off themselves
and just doing crazy things. And it's like they didn't just wake up one day and decide to do that. It's social conditioning that's led them to believe that that's the way to make a difference in the world. And anyone with a few years of maturity realizes that's not how you inflict any change. Even if you do believe in climate change, that's not how you make change.
It encourages virtue signaling, because what they're doing, Mark, when you look at it, they're always creating a victim, the left, and then they become a perpetrator. So you're a white male. You're a perpetrator. And that's what they've done deliberately, so that they can set us up against any minority group they want to.
Constantly apologizing for turning up anywhere. Our call to country and someone that happens at all these major sporting events. What's your position on that?
I don't need to be welcome to my own country. And I know a lot of Aboriginals say exactly the same thing. They say it's rubbish.
See, that's my point as well. And I say to people, like Mark's child, his little daughter was born here in the same way the first Aboriginal child was born here. So why is one more entitled than the other through spiritual providence that they turned up on this land? Right? Why should one have to do that? And I don't get it.
And
it's her home.
That's not saying that we shouldn't care for the native Australian Aboriginal people and with them we shouldn't provide them services and programs. That I just think that the two things are not, they get conflated together, and they're two completely different things. One is, like you said, is the virtue signaling that creates this negativity or this pessimism,
which is ruining the country.
Which is ruining the country. It's creating divide.
Well, look at our NRL. Look at our AFL. The elites in both those codes are Aboriginals. The proportion of Aboriginals in the country is about 3%, and so it's now climbing to about 5%. Because a lot of whites are registering as Aboriginal, right?
Serious.
Yeah, because of the incentives. That's true. But in the AFL and the NRL, it's way above 3%, way above 5%. If you look at the Parliament, it's 11% Aboriginal or part Aboriginal. So when we say the Aboriginals need help, no, don't set them apart from anyone else, because what you're actually doing is saying you can't get on without that. We've got Warren Mundine, we've got Nampa Jimpa Price, we've got Karen Little. Who are wonderful, wonderful humans, wonderful contributors, wonderful Australians. They don't need help, and they will tell you they don't need help. But what they want is a fair go. And what's happened is, it's again the same thing, wealth transfer. Government is there to transfer wealth illegally. And so what they do is they set up the inferior people, and automatically Aboriginals then start being bashed with the fact that they're, with the nonsense, the myth that they're inferior, which is a terrible way to try and help people. But when you go into the communities, you find the white and black Aboriginal industry has got its claws around everything. And so the billions, and it is literally billions of dollars, somewhere up around 40 billion, but at least 25, $30 billion spent. And most of the money goes to the black and white Aboriginal industry. I said white and black. Consultants, lawyers, bureaucrats, politicians, they don't get the money. Activists, academics, they're feeding off this. And you walk into the communities, and the people in the communities, the Aboriginal communities, the remote communities say, why don't we get any help? No, and so the other thing is, I was told by a councillor up in Bardu Island in Torres Strait, he said, mate, that the people on the Closing the Gap gravy train do not want to close the gap because they get money while the gap is there. We have gone backwards in the gap in the last few years.
It's kind of like the NDIS service providers, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But think of the people that are missing out by the white and black Aboriginal industry stealing that money, misappropriating that money. We've got white and black people getting very, very wealthy, but the people on the ground not getting it.
Mm.
Yeah, well, that's anywhere.
But they've created victims, and you don't say to an Aboriginal you're a victim, because people, white or black, will fall into the victimhood status. That's crippling.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned the role of government is to protect life, property and freedom.
Yeah.
And I think in the last 5 years with what we went through with COVID and so on, if I give a scorecard to our government on protecting life and protecting our freedoms and what they did to the accessibility of property to a lot of people, it's a disaster.
It's negative.
Oh my God.
They killed people. It was homicide.
Yeah, like it's it's like you couldn't get a worse score. Like,
No.
I mean, I don't know where to start talking about stuff because like there's the COVID stuff that we can talk about. I want to get into all of that. I want to get into your views on the mismanagement of COVID and the gross, egregious breaches of freedom that are pissed off so many Australians. And I think either of the two political majors need to start with an apology to the Australian people for what they put this country through and the damage they did. It'll never come, but
we're working on it.
Oh my God,
we're not going to give up on that one.
A royal commission into what happened. I don't know. What's your suggestion with trying to, because I think a lot of Australians have lost trust as a result of what went on.
Well, the irony is, Adam, I've noticed this in private sector, I've noticed it in many places. The irony is that people say the boss is a dickhead, the boss is irresponsible, the boss is dishonest. You can't trust politicians. Then where do they turn when something goes wrong? They become dependent on the boss. They automatically genuflect to the boss or the politicians. That's one of the fundamental problem. Our country is a constitutional monarchy. It's not a monarchy. Monarchy is where the king or queen has absolute power and says, this is what you're going to do, Mark, gives you orders, makes all the rules, makes all the regulations. A constitutional monarchy is one where you have a constitution that is the supreme governing instrument. And that is the case in our country. And the monarch in our country, and I think it's I used to criticize the monarchy because I don't believe people should get a title because of their parents. No, but then what I've realized is you look at the alternative, a president, and quite often that's based on corruption. Who can spend the most money? I'm not saying that about Trump. Trump is wonderful, but so a constitutional monarchy, we've got the king or queen of Britain acting as our monarch under the Constitution. Their role is prescribed in the Constitution. They're subordinate to the Constitution. They have to serve. And Queen Elizabeth did a marvellous job of that. Their powers are in reserve powers. If something happens, then they can do this. So we actually run the show. When I say we, I don't mean the politicians. I mean the people of Australia. Our country is the only country in the world in which the Constitution was voted on by the people before it came in. Did you know that?
I didn't.
No, I didn't know that till 6 years ago. Who are the only people who can change the Constitution? The people through a referendum. So who's in charge? Who elects the government? The people. But democracy in this country, like most of the Western countries, has become a passive sport, passive activity. We need active. A democracy can only survive and thrive when it's active. So I'm not just talking about voting. I'm talking about being pissed off with the parties, with your representative, making sure that they are representing you properly, holding them accountable. That might mean letters. It might mean turning up to their office.
Well, it's the freedom to be able to have the conversation. And, one of the things that really just has killed my faith in our leaders is these misinformation and disinformation bills and all these bills that they're just trying to ram through to stop people like us simply speaking about
our thoughts
on what we think the problems that Australia is facing.
You can't even question. You can't even question, let alone think.
And that's a really scary place for me.
I think that freedom of speech, we can jump into that quickly, because in order to have a functioning democracy, you need to be able to speak and share ideas.
Yep.
And if they are successful, and that you've done a wonderful job of highlighting the fact that they will sneak through what appears to be a harmless thing that nobody could vote against, like, for example, the
misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah.
Who could go against that?
Yeah, or children accessing social media. Like, we all, of course, worry about kids' addiction to social media, and it's hard to vote against. NDIS, right? What politician in Australia can get elected by saying we should stop funding people with disabilities because it's so unpopular to defund that? I'm not saying we should defund it. I'm just saying it's a very difficult bill to overturn because of the nature of it. But if we can't speak, and so just to finish that point, they sneak these bills through, and then we lose this freedom, and then they use it as a Trojan horse kind of thing. Free speech, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, in your language, the importance of free speech and how that's under threat right now. And then I want to actually ask you the question about why you guys abstained from the vote, even though I know, and many people know, that you are pro free speech by a mile.
We're the leaders in that fight. We are the absolute leaders in that fight.
So why is it so important for the average punter out there? Why is it, like I said to Pauline, why should a Pakistani immigrant be funding your defense against that Pakistani minister? Like, why should they care about free speech even if they really disagree with what you said?
Well, let's go right back to basics. Our universe is based on freedom. It evolves freely. Nature is free to do whatever she or he, whatever you want to call it, wants to do. And it evolves freely. The universe is free. The stars are free. The planets are free. Animals, plants are free. The universe is based on freedom. It's a model. We are not part of the universe. We are of the universe. We're one with the universe. So we are inherently, when you were born, you were granted every freedom there is, just by being born. And people have long, for the human condition, the ego, wants to come along and have control over you. So the constant battle is not left versus right. That's a distraction, that's a lie, that's a diversion. The battle is better looked at between freedom and control. And always beneath control, by the way, there is fear. So people who seek to control are afraid. What are they afraid of? Well, there are many things they're afraid of. But let's go to have a look at freedom. Let's go beyond freedom of speech, Adam. Freedom is in freedom of thought, freedom of faith. You can believe whatever you want to in terms of religion. Freedom of speech, freedom of association, who you mix with, freedom of exchange, who you exchange agreements with, who you trade with, freedom of movement, freedom of political assembly. There are so many freedoms. There's about 10 of them. I can't remember the rest of them. But that is what freedom's about. It's about liberty, and as the American Constitution or the American Bill of Rights says, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. It's fundamental to people, and that came from the universe. It came from, I happen to think there's a God. If you don't, it came from the universe, it came from God. You were born with it. And the human condition is a fight to try and take some of that away from you. Yeah. That's what it is. It's a battle between control and freedom. So the primary freedom, the one I missed, how could I miss it, is the freedom of life, the right to live. Okay, and that's being destroyed in our country and many Western countries. So the primary freedom is the freedom of life, the freedom to exist, and the primary vehicle for that is freedom of speech. So you can do all the other freedoms come from that freedom of speech. So that's why freedom of speech is so important. It ignites everything.
Yeah, and people say, even my wife, when I speak, she goes, I think that hate speech thing is good. People shouldn't be able to say horrible things. And I'm like, no, because
freedom of speech is not it's not determining who can say what. It's being sure that nobody can control who can't.
Well, that's what I said to her. Right? Like it all comes down to who's the arbiter of what defines hate speech, right? And that's why I personally, I've said it before, I'd rather know what somebody really thinks, even if I don't, in fact, especially if I don't agree, because then I know.
Yes. Right. And that's something that's so important. You can call me short. Now, you can call me a runt. You can call me any kind of name you want. You cannot give offense. I can take offense. That is my choice. There's nothing wrong with being short, right, Mark?
It's the best thing in the world.
I mean, we're actually not short. We're normal. These bastards are tall.
No, he's dodging a bullet.
I'm in between. Don't know what's in the water for these other guys.
Yeah. So when we protect people from being labeled, being called names, we are undermining their very being. Call me anything you like. When you call me something that's not based on not a statement based on data and fact, it shows that you haven't got an argument. So you can call me a anti-vaxxer, a conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat wearer, and all I have to say to you is, well, thank you very much for just admitting that I've won the argument, because if you had an argument, had the data, you would have given it to me in a logical structure, but you haven't. You've given me a label. You've just lost the argument.
Sticks and stones.
Yeah. That's a very important point, though. Label in place of facts. And this is what what's happened in the world. Like that people just want a simple label that they can just, oh, that's right, labeled, sorted. They don't actually want to think.
Left, right.
Exactly.
What they do then is, oh, I'm emotionally attached to the left or emotionally attached to the right. I don't think, I just go into battle. But that's rubbish because you're missing out on so much. So it's control versus freedom.
I agree with that. I think the problem largely comes from the fact that problem solving and critical thinking isn't taught in schools. And so it's just easier for people to side with the left or the right or whatever, because people are being taught to memorize and they're not being taught to think critically. You're obviously a person that has thought critically about things. It seems like you've got some spiritual leanings as well. So there's an open-minded thread to everything that you look into.
Well, that's the way the universe is.
Right.
So if I try to controlling things shows that I'm afraid. Controlling things shows that I lack the courage to just stand up and say what I think. So that's why I'm opposed to control. Now, see, I'm still nervous at the moment, and because that shows me that I've got something going on in my mind. So about 2001, I did my first 10-day Vipassana meditation course. It's actually 11 days. The most intense thing I've ever done. But every morning I sit down for an hour and 10 minutes in the morning, and I'd love to do it in an hour and 10 minutes in the evening, which is what practice is. It's non-sectarian, it's not religious. But I try to do 15 minutes in the evening before I go to bed, but my wife wants to talk to me for some reason. I don't know why. So I try and respect that. But when I first did Vipassana, I was very fit, physically able, very strong, no fat on me, but it was the most intense thing I'd ever done. Sitting still for an hour and eventually, when I first arrived at Vipassana meditation, it's a 2,500-year-old practice. The Buddha started, but it's not Buddhist. He said this is wonderful practice for just developing consciousness, and it's a very simple meditation. There's no rituals or anything like that. It's just being with your. It's basically, this sounds weird, but scanning your body and going through, and you pick up little sensations here and there that you didn't know about. And what happens is if I call you a name or make a threat to you, you will feel it somewhere in your body. It might be diaphragm, it might be your sphincter, it might be your buttocks, whatever. And that'll drive you. So you're not choosing your response to me. But if I can say, shit, I'm feeling really tight in the diaphragm or sphincter or whatever it is, and I can go, why? That's my stuff going on underneath that from when I was a child. Because another thing that Mary Montessori said is that we don't start developing, and this is proven now, we don't start developing our intellectual reasoning skills and our knowledge of the world until about 9, and then we start developing that. So what it means is that the primary years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6. So at 6, you're pretty much locked in, but you haven't started thinking yet. You haven't started reasoning yet. So Adam wasn't created by God. Your being was created by God. Adam was fabricated by you during a very ignorant time of your life, birth to 6. And then that'll determine in large proportion, Mark, your responses to threats, your responses to the world, how you see the world. Do I see myself as incompetent? Do I see myself as vulnerable? Do I see myself as whatever I see? And then I've got to look beneath that. So when I first started meditating, it was excruciating. I didn't know how I would finish the 10 days, the 11 days. But I got through it. And I got a little voice going on inside my head saying, you can do it. You can do it. And it wasn't my inner talk. It was something else.
It's a silent retreat, right? So you don't talk for 11 days.
Talk for 11 days or 10 days, that first 10 days. Because when we talk, when someone says something to you or even gestures to you, you interpret that. That dickhead, why did you do that, And so that judgment just clouds almost everything we do. And so you might do something to me or with me. My judgment, based upon my 0 to 6, then interprets that and then puts it on me saying, he's telling me I'm incompetent. He's telling me whatever. That points to my insecurities, not your nastiness.
Let's move back. I just want to move back while we got really close to that freedom of speech thing, and I just want to close that loop because for a guy that is so pro-freedom and so freedom of speech, a lot of people are up in arms about the abstaining from the freedom of speech, hate speech bill. So can you just give us the context on what that bill was for the vast majority of Australians who don't follow politics closely? What was the bill? What happened with the voting, and why did you abstain from it?
Okay. First of all, you're spreading misinformation.
Okay.
It's a hate crime bill. That's the title of the bill. Yeah. A lot of people think it's a hate speech bill. The second thing is that we had very good reasons. Pauline and I tossed it around. It was introduced very quickly and rushed through. So we would normally oppose a bill on that basis alone. Senator Rennick told a lie. He came onto as soon as the bill was done, he came out and said words to this effect: One Nation has joined with the Liberals and Labor Party in supporting the bill. That is a complete lie. Complete lie. We abstained, as you said. Then other people piled on. Clive Palmer piled on with lies. He made two statements. He said, we supported the bill. That is false. We did not support the bill. We totally opposed it. Then he also said it's a hate speech bill. It's not. And that's what people have been pushing. If you look at what we've actually done in the freedom space, Pauline was the first to move a motion in the Senate as part of the first step of getting a committee to develop the terms of reference for a referendum on enshrining freedom of speech in the Constitution, because it's not in the Constitution. It's implicitly there because of High Court rulings, but it's not in the Constitution. And what happened during COVID fraud was completely wrong. So we opposed the guillotining of the bill, that means cutting of debate. We opposed the bill itself because it was so poorly worded, and some of the provisions like mandatory sentences. But even then, in the morning, Pauline was asked a question at a media conference: do you support mandatory sentencing? Well, in some ways, we do support mandatory sentencing as a concept. Forget about the bill for a minute. As a concept, for example, for terrorist crimes. We're tired of weak judges. But generally, we're opposed to the mandatory sentencing. But she said in her response she will consider mandatory sentencing. So that was labelled as her agreeing with it. She doesn't agree with it. So there are many misrepresentations. So that bill was about saying that you cannot threaten someone based upon their associations with a group, whether it be disability, because there are people threatening people with AIDS, for example. There are many different groups. Religion is another one. Many people are being threatened because of their religion. We can't live in Australia in a free society with that kind of thing going on. We can't have threats of physical violence, threats of physical force. That is completely un-Australian. So Pauline and I sat there and thought, what the hell do we do? Because normally with a bill that's guillotine and a bill that we don't like, straight out oppose. And then we said, hang on a minute, what about the signal we're sending to the people who actually need this protection? We want to send a signal saying we will consider aspects of the bill, so we will abstain. And so many people have piled on saying we supported the removal of freedom of speech. We did not. It's a hate crimes bill to protect Australians against physical violence, physical threats, force being used, and we wanted to say we like that. So we didn't want to just trash the bill altogether, but we actually absolutely detest and do not support the detailed provisions in that bill. But it's not a hate speech bill.
Yeah, so it's a case of it's nuanced, and you couldn't vote for or against the entirety of the bill.
Well, we could have.
No, I mean, you could have, but there are aspects that you're probably for and aspects that you're probably not.
One aspect that we're for, and that is the concept that Australians need to live in safety and security, free from physical threats, violence and use of force. So that was the nuance. Now, there are some good people, Alex Antic, Ralph Babette, who came to me and said, what's your stance? And Alex and I get on really well. So does Ralph. I think Ralph's really good.
Ralph's trying to get it enshrined in the Constitution as well.
Well, he's following in Pauline's footsteps. Yeah. He's trying a different approach because he's trying to introduce it as a bill. We went through, the only way you can get it into the Constitution is go through a referendum. So we went through the legally proper way, but because it was a motion, it was voted against by the Greens, the Labor Party, the Liberal Party, and the Nationals from memory. When you introduce a bill, which is what Ralph's done, then very rarely do people oppose it. So Ralph won't get anywhere with it, but he's sending a signal, just like we did with the abstaining. So there's another point I was going to mention in there. Anyway.
Do you think we're at danger of seeing our mildly racist grandpa getting arrested in their house, just like we saw in the UK for making a comment on Facebook? Do you know that free speech has just gone out the window in Australia, in the UK, and people are getting, like, teachers are getting arrested for saying, you know, there are only two genders, that kind of stuff.
We are in danger of that. When you've got a premier like Dan Andrews, bringing it, it's almost like vomiting rather than laughing, Mark, and not having a go at you.
I lived in Melbourne during that time, so.
Dan Andrews' government brought in the affirmation laws, which mean that, this is one of the things that I'm really passionate about. The parenting responsibilities and duties are being completely undermined, and many parents don't see that. They're being done subtly but pervasively, just like so many other things. So if I had a son who was, 4, 5, 14 years of age, and he came to me and said, "Dad, I want to be a girl," I'd say, "Mate, first of all, that quite often happens it's not uncommon for that to happen in adolescence. People just going through lots of changes hormonally. So let's sit down and talk about it." That's what he wants. He's upset about something else. So you don't change the topic. You just say, let's discuss it, connect with him, listen to him, support him, say he's okay for doing that, and then get to the bottom. And the only way you can get to the bottom of that is by listening to him. He needs to feel heard. And quite often, he will just say, nah, it's not really, If it persists and it's really strong because he's being indoctrinated at school, which is the case in many, many occasions, then what you might do is bring in some counsellors. But it's your job to protect him, rather than just say, "Yeah, mate, cut your dick off." Or to a girl, "Cut your breasts off." Yeah. That's wrong. Now, if you stand up and actually have that conversation with your child and question your child's desire to change sex, then you are guilty of not affirming their desire, and you can go to jail in Victoria. You can go to jail. And yet imagine and so what happens is a lot of parents, and I mean quite a few parents, are afraid, not only because of that, but because of the gender transformation has become a cult. As gender dysphoria is a completely natural thing. People are not happy with their gender. So let them work their way through it. By the time they get to 18, certainly by the time they get to 25, they say, "Oh, geez, I'm glad I didn't cut my dick off." But the other thing is, there are only two genders, two sexes, male and female. With a male, you've got X and Y chromosomes. With a female, XX chromosomes. You cannot change that. So when you affirm someone and they cut off their bits and pieces, you're trapping them in something they're not very comfortable with at heart. And the majority of the suicides come from people who were told, "It's okay, Adam, you can reverse your transition." It's a complete lie. You cannot reverse your transition. You are buggered for life. Because while the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6, in adolescence we go through myelinization of the brain. Enormous changes going on, the physical changes as well, but also mental changes. You start playing with that, with puberty blockers and estrogen and testosterone, you're going to screw up with people. You can, and then when they're wanting to have kids later, they might come back to being the gender they were in the first place. Even if they haven't cut their bits and pieces off, they can't have kids.
I think what you're saying as well, and what I've heard a lot from people in the know, is that when we're going, like you just said, scientifically, when we're going through that age, we are unsure about ourselves.
Yeah.
Not just our genders, we are just unsure about ourselves when we're going through puberty.
Yep.
Right. And so
you're flooded with hormones.
All these hormones, like when a woman is pregnant, she's flooded with hormones, and her mood may change because of the hormones, whatever those moods are, positive or negative. The same thing happens when kids are going through puberty. There's a whole bunch of changes that are going on internally, leading us to be unsure about what's happening and who we are. The fact that that's been linked to gender seems like like more fashion than it is science.
You nailed it. That's exactly what it is. But there's also
like, how can people say that I want to be considered a cat, or I'm a furry, or like that's preference.
I think we're moving out of this madness, to be honest.
Yeah, we are, and Trump has a big part of that. But
the point is that it is normal, like you were saying.
Yeah, and if you look, Adam, at what happened in the Senate, the Greens first started talking about this madness. And what they do normally is they not only talk about the madness, but they then say, if you don't agree, you're they
demonize you.
What is it? Transphobic.
Label you.
So you want to shut up. Well, I realized very early, and I was the first one to speak out consistently against this. And what happened was the Greens would have 4 or 5 speakers speaking for it, and I'd oppose it.
It's that time of year again at Unemployable, where we're opening up our Unemployable Business Coaching Program. It's over a 12-month period, and with that, you get private one-on-one coaching, group coaching, as well as private and live events throughout the year. You could get private coaching with me, and not only me, but our panel of experts that we have put together. These panel of experts have been in our network and are the exact people that we use in our business successes. People from branding, sales, marketing, our lawyers, our accountants, everyone that has helped build our businesses, you have access to. If this sounds of interest, go to www.unemployable.com.au/coaching and register your interest to see if it's a fit for you and us. Hope to see you there.
And then bit by bit, more jumped in. Canavan, Rennick, Antic, Hansen, a very big one on this. We had parents coming to see us. Babette was another one. And the last time this was raised in the Senate, it was to do with a bill that we co-sponsored to stop the federal government spending money on any attempts to change gender. And I spoke first. And I said, I looked across at the Greens and said, you're the people that are causing kids to suicide because they changed their bits and pieces, and then they realize it's not reversible, and they commit suicide. And that was the first time they had been accused of suicide, causing suicide. And Nick McKim came up and he jumped up and he spoke a whole lot of horseshit. He just went off. His speech was so embarrassing that I posted it on my website. They have no facts to go by. And he was the last of the Green speakers, one speaker, and then up came the others on our side. So we had 5 speakers against their 1. So we had reversed the tables. Now, I'm not trying to claim sole credit for that, but initially people were afraid of speaking up against it because they'd be labelled transphobic. You had the Australian New Zealand Psychologists or Psychiatrists Association come out last year and saying affirmation is the completely wrong treatment for gender dysphoria. Well, hello, where were you for the last 10 years? But they waited until we gave them space to be able to say that. So a lot of doctors were bullied and intimidated into it because they'd be called transphobic if they didn't just go along with it.
Just to be clear as well, I'm not saying, and I don't think you're saying, that gender dysphoria doesn't exist. We're agreeing that it exists.
We're saying it does exist.
We're saying that it exists. We're saying that affirmation is not the correct way.
Treatment. Yes. And it became very significant when some of the gender clinics in overseas were shut down. Were the largest in the world, I think, was Tavistock in Britain. That had been doing things automatically, and they have now got a large class action suit against them. Sweden, I think, Finland, they're shutting these clinics down. And what we're doing is opening them up in this country. So it's also important to understand, Mark, that there is a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion of people who are hermaphrodites. They've got bits and pieces of both sexes in them. So but the way to look after them is not to pillory and confuse other kids. The way to look after them is just understand them and love them and respect them as humans. That's all people want.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier trust and leadership. Now, where do you feel at the moment in Australian politics that trust is being broken and leadership is lacking? I know you probably have a long list, but what are some of the top things that you're seeing?
COVID, the anti-human lie, the belief that government can solve everything. Every major problem in this country, Eric, comes out of Parliament House, Canberra. Every major problem. There are a few that come out of the state parliaments, but the federal government worsens them. There's another one, climate. That's a lie. We have. I've done research on climate now since 2007. I've got an incredible colleague just south of Canberra. His IQ is off the scale, but more importantly, he's very, very practical. He's the sort of guy who says, I think I'll build myself a magnetic levitation train. And you're going, what? And he doesn't mean he'll buy a few parts off eBay and assemble them. He means going to his lathe and making them. This guy is off the scale when it comes to intelligence, but he's very, very practical. He loves research. He's just inquisitive. He's been that way ever since he was a boy. But he researches nature. He researches food. He researches climate. So when he saw me flogging away on this thing, came and said, I'll help you. He developed computer programs. He's a computer programmer, but he's also a wonderful human. He's a Renaissance man. He can dabble in everything. He wrote programs to go into major sites around the world and scrape their climate data out, all legal. Scrape that climate data out. He's amassed 24,000 data sets on climate and energy. Not only does he do that, he then goes into statistics book and work out ways of assembling them, combining them, mixing and matching them. And Mark and Eric, there is not a single climate factor, temperature, rainfall, drought, severity, duration, frequency, storm, severity, duration, frequency, anywhere in the world that shows there is a change in climate.
Why are they pushing it?
Control and wealth transfer. What they want. And if you look at Maurice Strong, I wouldn't mind talking about him in a minute. Maurice Strong is the father of global warming in the 1970s. And then he became the father of the transformation to global climate change. They're pushing it for control and wealth transfer. They want to control how we develop and what we can and can't use. They're wanting it also for funding the United Nations budget. At the moment, the United Nations relies upon donations, grants from member countries, particularly the United States. But what they want to do is develop their own budget so they're independent. And that's what carbon dioxide taxes are eventually meant for. But they also want to look after parasitic billionaires and corporations that are going to feed off this. The major banks, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Rothschild's Bank in Australia, their advisory boards included, what was her name? The previous CSIRO chief executive. Conflict of interest. But the banks were looking at huge money exchanging carbon dioxide credits, money and wealth transfer. And what you've got, and then these are not just my words, these are the words and admissions of the senior UN bureaucrats, including Cristina Figueres, who was head of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. She said this is about transforming the global economy, the economic world order. And what they want to do is bring in socialism. Maurice Strong, as I said, he fabricated this. Incredible intellect, incredible manipulator of people. He said he had two aims in life. One is to put in place an unelected socialist global government. These people are not our friends. The second one was to deindustrialize Western civilization, get rid of these things, get rid of our technology, get rid of this, get rid of what we're seeing around us. These people are anti-human, and their practices and their words are showing that. So it's all deliberate.
Like if I wanted to Google, is that true? Those were his two aims in life. Where would I find that information to confirm that?
I've forgotten where I found it, but I checked it myself back in around 2007, 2008.
The guy's name is what?
Maurice, M-A-U-R-I-C-E.
Yep.
Strong, S-T-R-O-N-G.
Yeah. So verify, guys. Go out and look this up yourself, and try to dig to this. Don't just listen to Malcolm or ask him to do the work.
A lot of people give us flack about not fact-checking it, but really, like you were saying earlier, the responsibility is on the list.
So this is a pretty evil dude, right?
Well, he is a very evil dude, but very, very slick. He was, Maurice Strong, the most, where do you start? The most significant thing, you look up until about 1850, just in the middle of the start of the Industrial Revolution. Prior to that, our species was scratching around in the dirt, subject to famine, subject to all kinds of variations in weather, right? Very vulnerable. Then we developed hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. They're not fossil fuels, they're hydrocarbon fuels. They're combinations of hydrogen atoms and carbon atoms. And they liberated humanity. And the real price of energy, until we started this climate crap, was on a relentless decrease. The lower you get your price of energy, the more productive you are, automatically. The more productive you are, the more wealth and prosperity you have. And it's not just the few billionaires who used to control the money, even though Rockefeller made a lot of money. Everyone in society was lifted dramatically from 1850 to 1996. Everyone. We have never seen the human race move so much. And now we've seen China in just a space of 40 years emerge with material wealth. Now we're seeing India on it. And those countries want hydrocarbon fuel because they know that's what the secret is. And now,
cheap energy?
Well, it's cheap energy, but it's also reliable. See, what we've done up until the use of hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, we were dependent on nature. We were dependent on beasts of burden. We were dependent on slaves. We were dependent on wind, solar. Not solar as we know it today, but solar through crops. And if you had a prolonged drought, you're buggered. That's it. People died from famines. Now we can store water, we can build dams, we can build clean water supply systems. So even the for example, the dramatic improvement in health is due to that.
Energy related.
All energy related. It pervades everything. Now in 1996, John Howard came to power, and he said, "We will not comply. We will not sign the UN Kyoto Agreement." I mean, you can check this up. And everyone went clap, clap, clap. But he said, "We will comply with it." What's that mean? So what he did was he started to reverse the cost of energy. Instead of relentlessly falling, he reversed it, which is reversing human progress. But what he also did was he recognized in 1996, the UN's Kyoto Climate Protocol came in 1997, all based on bullshit. And what happens is, when you're at these gab fests, when you're at Parliament House, you know how a lot of people are sheep? There's no difference amongst doctors. There's no difference amongst politicians. There's no difference amongst the political leaders from around the world who congregate, and they're afraid to say sorry, but there's no evidence for this. So what he did was he put in place a renewable energy target, which we're now seeing is destroying our electricity grid. We've gone from being the cheapest electricity in the world to the most expensive, among the most expensive. He put in place a national electricity market, which is not a market, it's a racket. It's bullshit. It's not a free exchange of electricity. It's ruled by the bureaucrats who favour solar and wind. No doubt about it.
This is what's pushing price of everything up as well, right? Like,
and then they say, solar and wind are the cheapest. Well, why have we got record amounts of solar and wind and our prices are the highest they've ever been? Every country around the world, if that's a graph of electricity price and percentage of solar, as you get more solar in, you get a higher price. Every country that's done significant changes. John Howard brought that in. But here's what he did. The Liberals are supposed to, one of the things that they will die on the hill for is secure property rights. Because that's fundamental to responsibility, fundamental to innovation, fundamental to human progress, fundamental to development. Property rights are absolutely essential. Well, John Howard said, his government said, people are not ready to buy off in this carbon dioxide trading yet. It's a tax. And for the UN. So what he said was, what his government said was, let's put in place credits for that. So instead of shutting down our factories, our cars, our trucks, our farming, our power stations, what we'll do is we'll go to the UN and say, mate, if we stop the clearing of land, that will save trees so they can absorb carbon dioxide. So would you give us a credit rather than shut down carbon dioxide production? We will stop the clearing of land. To do that, he had to confront Section 51, Clause 31 of the Federal Constitution, which is that if you interfere with someone's rights to use their property, you must pay just terms compensation. Now, at the same time, the states do not have that protection. So what John Howard did, it's all documented. He went to the states and said, "Can you stop the clearing of land? You won't have to pay compensation," because Howard was looking at $100 to $200 billion of compensation for the farmers. And they did that. Peter Beattie's written about it. He was the Premier at the time and Queensland, and Bob Carr was the Environment Minister or the Premier at the time in New South Wales. So here's a key plank of Liberal philosophy, protecting property rights, being completely trashed. So you think of it, a farmer buys a farm. He's got the right to clear the land because he wants to go from beef farming to a more value-added, like wheat or something like that, whatever. Just, he can't do it without getting permission. And that is the destruction of property rights. But it wasn't just in the farms, it was in the towns. We've got a guy up in Brisbane, I know his niece, and he's getting on in age, and he said he wants to sell his blocks of land. He's got a major site for development. So the city council came in and said, yeah, you can sell them, but you'll have to give us this area for a park. Now, I don't mind that the park's being created, but you compensate him for it. You know, you don't steal land off people. In Mossman, a fellow in Mossman in Sydney, he told me that there are regulations in the Mossman City Council that say you've got to have a certain percentage of grass or bush in your property. You can't concrete it all. If you want to concrete it, go ahead and concrete it. You know, so if you affect the drainage and affects a neighbour, then you have to wear the cost of that. But you know what I mean? Property rights are fundamental.
Windfall tax is another one in Victoria, the windfall tax, like in taxing property. That's another way of stealing property rights, isn't it?
Yeah.
They just tax people on the Gold Coast. If you're on level 5 or above, their rates are up 40%.
One of the things that got the most attention on...
Did I answer your question, by the way, about the hate crimes bill?
You did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's right. I started just before we go on what you're talking about, Mark. So I mixed with Ralph Babette and Alex Antic in particular, and Ralph said to me, "What are you doing on the bill?" And I said, "Abstaining." He said, "Oh, mate, you got to oppose it." And I said, "Yeah, there's grounds for that." And I like Ralph. I was seriously considering opposing it, and I remembered the conversation we had with Pauline. I was umming and ahhing. So it's not an easy thing to do, because we also opposed all of the guillotines and we supported the motion that failed to extend the debate, because that was what we're really after. We were after better debate, better examination of the bill. The Labor Party, combining with the Greens usually, and often with the Liberals, in this case it was the Liberals, guillotined 205 bills as of now.
No debate.
No debate. No or minimal debate, just truncated debate. So what I'm saying is, quite often we would say, just oppose it. But we had to send a signal, Pauline and I. We're not afraid to be the only two. We're not, because we had to send a signal, and I've had people walk up to me and say, "We understand what you did. Thank you." Because it means you're protecting our security.
I think this is why podcasts and this new medium of media, like you mentioned at the start, is so important, because, you know, I even responded to Pauline about the bill and on X, and she responded, and I still didn't quite understand it.
Yeah.
But hearing you speak about it today, it's helped me to understand that there's parts of what is in that bill that you support, and that's that everybody should feel safe from threat.
The other thing, Mark, is that on the morning of the day of that bill being voted on, we were released a suite of policies, and I'm happy to talk about them later. But they're very comprehensive, and they're all about putting more money in people's pockets, because we are going through a hell of a tough time with families and singles and small businesses in this country, and that needs to be addressed. We've got rampant government that is stealing this money and wasting it, pissing it up against the wall. That's what we want to bring back. Our policies were released on the evening before to major newspapers in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne, and they took off. You know, on the comments section beneath the newspaper articles online, wonderfully positive. And some other minor parties went, shit, what do we do?
Copy them.
No, steal the airtime and smash them and try and destroy us through lies. As I said, Jared Rennick told a lie. We did not support the bill along with the Liberal and Labor Party. We abstained, and I've explained that.
I want to talk about, you touched on something because we are a business show, and I'd love your input because I haven't had what?
I was just going to ask about the 44% on property. Well, we're talking about property rights and tax.
Yeah. Okay.
That's so one of the things on that got a lot of comment and a lot of feedback was Pauline mentioned that 44% of building a new house is in one form tax.
Yep.
And a lot of people said, "Oh, she's a liar. You guys are lying. You guys, you should have fact checked it. Like it's bullshit. It's crap. I'm a developer. That's not true." Can you clarify where that 44% comes from?
Yeah, that comes from. In the first place, I knew about this 10 years ago. Someone showed me a newspaper article in Sydney, Sun Herald, I think, or the Herald Sun, or whatever it's called in Sydney. Or the Telegraph, it might have been Telegraph, I can't remember, whichever one Murdoch owns. And it was quoting the Housing Institute of Australia or the Housing Institute of New South Wales or New South Wales Realtors or whatever. They said it's 45 to 50%. And if you look at, there are so many factors there. If you look at, I organised and led an economic summit in our Senate office in one of the buildings at Queensland State Parliament House in 2017. We had a number of economists there, and Dr. Alan Moran, he said that the cost of building a house in Houston, Texas, and Sydney, Australia at that time were about the same. The cost of the land was astronomically high in this country. So there are so many things. It's not just land prices, which are just being raised dramatically by regulations, red tape, blue tape, green tape,
open space contributions, windfall taxes, stamp duty,
and green tape. We, as you know, because of my stance on the environment needing to be healthy for civilization's future, I'm a really pro-environmental person, but I'm after sensible policies because I'm also pro-human. And the environmental movement has been hijacked by ideology. It's a bullshit movement now, the Greens, because they're using the environment as a way of saying you're evil, let us control it, and so that's what they're doing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So you mentioned in passing that the whole climate debate is a massive fraud, but the other one that you mentioned in passing was the debasement and the printing of money and the fiat currency. Can you speak to that quickly? Because I've been getting barbecued over the last few weeks about trying to highlight how, I think it's money in the bank that you've gone out and worked for is, just an abstracted form of your time and energy, your life force. And it's sitting there in a bank account getting devalued.
Correct.
And we just accept, okay, well, it's just inflation, but it shouldn't be the case. Can you, in my opinion, could you speak to that?
Sure. It's a stealth tax. I'll come back to that. Let's have a look at a real example here in this country. During the COVID fraud, the COVID mismanagement, the COVID response, it wasn't COVID that caused the problems, it was government that caused the problems. And I'm going to put my hand up and say that when it first arrived here, we were given these pictures of people dead in the streets of Italy and France and Greece and China and all the rest of it. We now know that they were propaganda. They were complete bullshit. The death toll from COVID was less than the flu.
Do you mean we? Are you talking
Parliament.
About the political class? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not part of the political class.
No, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So in Parliament, you're not talking the general population. In Parliament, you guys were getting this stuff given to you.
Yeah, and we could see it on the news.
Okay.
So
so they sit you down and say, all right, and who is they?
No. That the propaganda was everywhere. It was through the media.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can cover all the points. So we went, shit, what if this is real? That means if it's real, you have got to do something to prevent it. So we said, okay, to the government, Morrison's government, go for it. Job, what was it called? Job seeker and job keeper.
Job keeper or something.
Yeah, the second one was job keeper. Hundreds of billions of dollars.
Printed.
And if people want a source of the printing, there are many, many very good books, credible books that discuss it. Henry Ford, who was no slouch, he was a well-known businessman, he said if the people knew what was going on with their money, there would be a revolution by morning. One of the best places to hide something is on people's noses. Let them have a look at it every day. They get so used to it. This has been happening since 1913 with the Federal Reserve Bank, which is privately owned. That's another fact. But I asked a question of the Reserve Bank of Australia governor at Senate estimates, and the deputy governor answered my question. I said, is it true that money is basically printed? I can't remember my exact question. And he said, and electronic ledgers. And he said, paused. And he sort of thought about it. And he said, yes, Senator Roberts, electronic journal entries. Yeah. So yes, it is. So what happens is they don't have any assets at stake. They just make an entry in a ledger, and then they give you the loan. And when you default, you lose your asset, but they haven't got anything at stake, just reserves. And they're fabricated. So yes, it's very true. Now, if you have a look at what Morrison did and the Reserve Bank of Australia during COVID, they flooded the joint with cash. We told them that will lead to severe inflation. No, it won't. Well, it did. And then we had Chalmers come in as the Treasurer and Albanese as the Prime Minister, and continuing to hand out cash. And that's what perpetuated inflation.
So what's One Nation's view of Bitcoin?
We don't have an official view of Bitcoin. I'm still doing my research on that. At the moment, I would say, and I've read one book on it, I'm about to read another, and I've listened to people. There seems to be, I'll see if I can put my thoughts together on this. There seems to be genuine merit in it that's worth exploring. There seems to be, what's attractive to me is I can't understand this yet to put my finger on it, but it seems to be, it's a way of bypassing central banks, which I love. I don't love central banks. I love the bypassing of central banks. It makes money honest again, because with printing of money, money is not honest. With gold standard, the money is honest, but people are telling me that Bitcoin is like the gold standard. So I'm really keen to learn more. Trump sent the right signals about that, so maybe that's correct. What was the other thing I was going to say? It takes it out of the hands of the central bank and puts it in the hands of the people, which I love. But that's right. The other thing is, I've got a very good I've got fantastic staff, but one of them is an economist by training, but he's practical. He's run businesses. He's not just a theoretical economist. He said Bitcoin at the moment is still highly volatile. And so he said, do not buy Bitcoin in one hit, because you could buy it up here and lose your money. He said, buy it on weekly installments. And he said, then you'll average out overall. But he said,
dollar cost average, yeah.
Yeah.
The one book to read is the Bitcoin Standard. That's the Bible if you want to learn that space.
And we always talk about money printing and debasement, and there's a really, really good book by Lynn Alden called Broken Money, and it just talks about the history of money and how, it's a very abstract thought, money printing. Right?
Is that Lynn?
Lynn Alden.
Yeah, I watched her half-hour video. There was nothing there new. A couple of things that were new, but when I first started on this climate scam, because as an engineer, I've been taught that science is the basis of engineering. So I understand what science really is. And as a mining engineer, I had to keep people alive underground. That meant ventilating mines. That meant not understanding atmospheric gases. And when I realized that they were telling us that carbon dioxide from human activity was destroying the planet, I went, bullshit. Because the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 0.04%. And somebody said, oh, yeah, but one of the, you can have that much arsenic in your food and you'll die. And I said, yeah, but this is not a chemical effect. This is a physical effect. 0.04% of the Earth's atmosphere is not going to cause any problems. We now know that's true, because if you look at what they're telling us about climate is that we're causing an increase in levels of carbon dioxide, which is causing heating. Now, what we need to do then is stop the production of human carbon dioxide, which is cut back on livestock, see the control of food, cut back especially on the use of coal, oil, and natural gas, cars, etc. Now, we've had 2 natural experiments on that. And what they said was, if we cut back on the use of these fuels, we will do that to our production of to the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Well, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been going up, but that's controlled entirely by nature. So let me explain why. In 2009, we had a severe recession around the world, almost a depression because of the global financial crisis. So when you go into a recession, you use less hydrocarbon fuels and you produce less carbon dioxide. So what happened to the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? You'd expect it to go like that. It didn't. That's what they told us. It went like that, continued increasing. And then in 2020, we had the COVID near depression around the world because everyone shut down. And again, you'd expect it to level of carbon dioxide to do that. That's what they told us. It did that. There's not even an inflection, because people don't realize that, according to Henry's law, the oceans control the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because the oceans have in dissolved form 50 to 70 times more carbon dioxide than in the entire atmosphere. Wow. And that's from the United Nations figures themselves. So what it means is that if you have slight increases in temperature, carbon dioxide gets released from the oceans. If you have slight decreases in temperature, carbon dioxide gets absorbed into the oceans. So that's what controls it. And you can see every year there's a seasonal level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And
it's fascinating.
It's just...
We're running out of time. So Eric, you had something I'd love to just run through before we finish, and I'll get Eric, just some of these policies that you and Pauline announced from, it looked like you're in Parliament House when you were at the press conference. I'd love to run through those quickly.
Sure.
So that if people are thinking of voting for One Nation, you can run through the reasons why before we wind it up. Did you have a question, Eric?
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned people saying thank you, keep going, job well done. And Pauline Hanson said the same thing off camera.
She's a walking logo. Yeah, they see the red hair and just flock.
Yeah. But she says that it's not reflecting in the voting booths as much as she wants. Why is that?
2 reasons. One is that people are ingrained to vote like mum and dad. If their mum voted Liberal and dad voted Liberal, they vote Liberal. If they vote Labor, they vote Labor. That's entrenched. Another part of that, Eric, is that the media, you watch, it's already started. They will focus on Labor, Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Albanese, Dutton, Albanese, Dutton, Albanese, Dutton. They're indoctrinating people to think that they're the only 2 choices. So if you don't like Labor, vote Liberal. So that's what's going on. We also saw in the Queensland election, for example, Labor has been so bad in Queensland that they just barely got in 2020 because of COVID, because when they had the COVID mismanagement, people thought that Anna kept us safe. Complete lie. But that's what they did. So they kept her back. If COVID hadn't happened, she would have been out on her ass. In February of 2020, she was gone. So people are misled. But the second thing is that they got so bad in the following 4 years that in October of 2024, when we had the state election, people were saying, we've got to get rid of Labor. That was the overriding thing. Got to get rid of Labor. So people walked into the ballot box thinking, can't have Labor back, can't have Labor back. So I'll vote for the other guys, the Liberal Party. So I saw time and time again, people would walk out of the polling booth and say, voted for you, Malcolm, love your work. I put One Nation number 2. Put Liberals 1 because they were scared. So what we're saying to people is, we understand you don't want Labor back, and I think the same is with Albanese. For goodness sake, vote conviction, because we've got so many people who are saying One Nation's policies are the right ones for us. Vote conviction. So put One Nation number 1. And I will guarantee you that whoever you put number 2, we will do a better job then. But then the second thing is, okay, now you're worried about Labor getting back. All you have to do is put Liberal before Labor. And your vote, if we don't get in, the other minor parties don't get in, your vote will stop at Liberal. So vote 2 things. Vote conviction and vote protection. Vote conviction, put One Nation number 1. If we don't get in, the vote protection, which means your vote will go to Liberal. And if you don't like Liberal and you want to make sure that Liberals don't get in, then just put Labor before Liberal. But above all, put One Nation number 1.
That's a great explanation on how that works.
And if you are interested, we actually built this for Pauline's visit, but we're going to reuse it here.
Yeah.
If you go to unemployable.com.au/One Nation, O-N-E, O-N-E, not the numeral one, but the spelling, O-N-E. So unemployable.com.au/One Nation. We've set up a page here where we have gotten all your policies from the website and we've put them into AI, and it's turned it into a podcast where for 20 minutes you can hear AI explain to you, and they haven't leftied it. They've left it really quite balanced, where they've unpacked all of your policies and explain it to you in plain English. So if you're not a reader and you're not going to sit there and download the PDFs or whatever, go there. We'll give you the printout and we'll give you the audio, and you can just hear it read to you by as impartial as AI can be. It's not by us. It's by AI, and it'll give you a rundown of all their policies for free. Just go to our webpage.
The key thing is that, as I said earlier, our policies have been costed. They're based on budget costs, based on Parliamentary Budget Office estimates. The key part of it is putting more money in your pocket. And where do we get the money from? We get more than enough. We get $40 billion to put money into people's pockets. And the things we're doing there are productivity enhancements, like cutting the cost of fuel, which is in everything.
Cutting through that. That was cool. So 50% fuel excise cut, wasn't it?
Yeah, 26 cents a litre.
26 cents a litre. And you're delivering that by cutting the fuel excise for the first 12 months of you're elected straight away.
Yeah, I'm working on getting Pauline to make that 3 years.
Okay.
That'll send a stronger signal to the Reserve Bank. These policies, the Reserve Bank will love.
So that's one. Getting aged care, older people back to work who want to be in work.
Well, there's a really powerful one called income splitting. So if a male and female, or husband and wife, or spouse, whatever, partner, whatever you want to call it, if one of them's working and the other one's not and looking after the kids, then you can combine your income and divide it by 2. So that dramatically drops your tax rate. So that will, for a typical family on an average income with one stay-at-home parent, that will save about $9,500 to $10,000 a year.
Yeah, so it brings a threshold, I think, before you pay taxes up to 35 grand.
Yes.
Lower.
Well, that's for the self-managed superannuation.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Yeah. So
income splitting is one.
Yes, and the other thing is cutting the electricity prices because of at the moment, coal is being smashed. It's causing destruction of the coal boilers, the generators for electricity, because coal is meant to be stable baseload power. It's being switched on and switched off, and that's destroying it. So there's nothing cheaper than coal anywhere in the world. That's why the Chinese are wanting it. We produce 560 million tons of coal roughly a year. Chinese produce 4.5 billion. Wow. And they're heading for more, and they're heading for 5, and they're importing out. So coal is not dead. The forecasts for coal are dramatically increasing. We are shooting ourselves in the head economically in this country. So what we want to do is change the national electricity. What we will do is change the national electricity market rules, which govern the allocation of electricity, rather than being artificially favouring solar and wind, which destroys coal, makes it uncompetitive. We want to just let the cheapest go. And
one of the things we hear over and over and over is we are just not getting anything for our resources. What's your plan?
Yes, we want to put a tax on production and exporting of natural gas. At the moment, Norway does that. Qatar does that, and they get so much money from doing that. Norway gives it to a wealth fund for their citizens. Qatar, I don't know what happens to it. But in our country, Bob Hawke and John Howard, Labor and Liberal, basically gave our gas away. And what we want to do is tax that based upon volume of production, not on profit and loss. Because as you know, with profit and loss, you can make it anything you want.
Exactly.
So you can cut your tax dramatically to almost zero just by allocating costs to fire.
You're basically proposing to tariff it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would tariff it so we get paid for it.
We're in a crazy situation, Adam. I'm told that the Japanese import our gas.
And resell it.
Well, not only that, but they import our gas and they charge their importers $3 billion as import duty. And we get sweet FA.
Mm.
But think about that. We have got the world's largest tax evader in Chevron, basically an American company, taking our resources and paying zip. And John Howard introduced the exporting of that gas. He authorized the exporting, his government. Prior to that, Bob Hawke changed the petroleum rent resources tax. It sounds wonderful. It guaranteed that they won't pay any tax. So they're both parties are doing it, and they don't want to tax it. We also want to get a pipeline across the country because we know that our Northwest Shelf gas can be converted to liquid fuels, diesel and petrol. We can be self-sufficient.
Okay. Guys, JFK said every country gets the government they deserve, which is, we live in a democracy. You can vote, actually, guys, and you know how to vote if you like what Malcolm's saying. Anything else? What else are you guys going to get stuck into to put more money back in our pockets as a nation and as a people? I've got here some notes. NDIS, Medicare fraud. Fraud is huge in NDIS. Fraud is huge in Medicare.
Well, there are 4 components, as I said. The first one is putting more money in people's pockets. So the second one is, where do you get the money from? Third one is that the money that we can get from shutting down waste and duplication in the federal government is around about at least $90 billion. So that means $40 billion to put more money in people's pockets. That leaves another 50. So another $20 billion a year in investing in infrastructure for the future productivity and the future wealth. And the rest can go off to paying the debt. Because at the moment, we have got a debt of about $800 billion, $860 billion. In 2026, 27, that will be the interest payments will be the largest single budget item there is. That's if NDIS doesn't go rampant. So where are we getting the money from? From shutting down government waste and duplication. Shut down, abolish the climate fraud department, the climate change department, because that'll save us at least $30 billion a year. Then all the regulations, the subsidies, all the rest of it go to that. And it'll free up the price of electricity, and reduce the price of electricity dramatically, and it'll also get the government the hell out of interfering in people's lives. The government, through the climate change, climate fraud policies, net zero from the United Nations, Paris Agreement for the United Nations, which both the major parties are pushing. What we will do is take the government out of every aspect of your lives. If you look at energy, it's in everything. The second thing is the health, education, housing under the Constitution are state government responsibilities. And when you have states, this is really important. When you have states being responsible for something, then they compete on being better than other people. That gives us accountability. So what happens is if New South Wales does a better job on education than Queensland, people will actually leave Queensland and go to New South Wales because you've got choice. So when you've got no choice, you've got no accountability. So at the moment, the federal government has come in. John Howard again introduced the national curriculum, which has come in from the United Nations. That's why our education standards are plummeting, because there's no accountability now. Because when the federal government has the curriculum, there's no competing curriculum. So federal waste in duplicating the state and then on education and health and aged care and housing, that'll go. That saves billions there. We also want to abolish the federal government looking after, well, no, they don't look after, they destroy the federal government Department of Aboriginal Affairs, all the racket on the white and black Aboriginal industry. And instead we would fund grants to the local communities, bypass all the white and black Aboriginal industry. There are other departments, NDIS, bring that back into shape. That's a real disaster. And because
massive.
Well, not only is there so much fraud going on, Adam, but people who deserve care are not getting it, and people who are not entitled to it are getting huge amounts spent on them.
providers are just milking it. A lot of providers, I've just heard story after story.
You know, I didn't learn about this until yesterday. I haven't checked it out, but we had two really well-spoken, a man and a woman from one of the, they're privately owned, but they're one of the biggest providers of NDIS care, right? And they're Australian, and they employ employees. Some of the foreign equity firms, so you know what that signals, they're after money, also have providers. They don't employ them. They put them on an Uber-type contract. So they don't pay workers' compensation. They don't pay superannuation. They don't pay payroll tax. And so what's happening is the federal government reimburses them, and they skim off, what would that be, 12, 14, 15%? And that's going straight overseas. It's rampant. But there's a lack of accountability. So these guys were telling us, I forgot what I was going to say about that, but it's just rife. I learned so many new things just when listening to these people, and we thought we'd done our research on NDIS. It's just being rorted. But the important thing is it's got to be brought into control, because if you don't, the people who need care won't get it. That's
the sad irony of the whole thing, is that's what always happens with these things, is the scammers get paid, and the people who actually need it end up having to jump through more hoops, and they're already under enough stress and duress. It's the mismanagement of the program. It's always problematic.
It was brought in by Julia Gillard to try and win an election. She brought in the Gonski report, which was for education. She brought in the NDIS just to get headlines for an election, and they had no meat around the bones. And the Liberal Party came in, what do we do with this? And then they became paranoid about fraud, because
it's approaching our military budget, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's above.
It's above the military budget.
I think so.
Aren't the two biggest line items NDIS and interest repayment?
I think you're right. Medicare, welfare, social services would be up there somewhere.
Spending as much in the vicinity of what it costs to defend the country on disability support. I mean, that to me is like, that just does not sound correct.
Well, the numbers don't make
It just
sense.
doesn't work. In closing, probably one of the hottest topics right now with housing affordability and just the state of the nation is immigration. What's One Nation's net zero immigration policy?
Zero net, I call it, because net zero.
Sorry.
It's carbon.
Net zero is the carbon dioxide scam.
Yeah.
Zero net is immigration. What we want to do, I'll make these very, very clear. There is no bigger threat to the housing prices, no bigger driver of housing prices, which are now at record levels and unaffordable for many people, and also rents, than immigration. So what we want to do is both reduce the demand for houses and increase the supply of houses, and also reduce the cost of new houses, and that'll all drive down rents. Rents are just skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. So we want to stop immigration. Not forever, so really it's a pause. We want to deport 75,000 people who are here illegally. The federal government's just, I don't care, both Liberal and Labor. And the big immigration policy was brought in by John Howard and perpetuated by each of the prime ministers since then. Liberal, Labor, Nationals, all of them have perpetuated the big immigration. One of the really sad things, inhuman things, is that Albanese said, when he first came into power, we will continue big immigration until we catch up with pre-COVID levels. Pre-COVID, there were 1.9 million people here on resident visas, or temporary visas, I should say, temporary visas. There are now 2.5 million people here on temporary visas. And they each need a roof, they each need a bed. That's taking up houses. We have got so many of them here illegally. We want to deport them. So that will stopping immigration until our infrastructure catches up, because they haven't been doing spending on major infrastructure for decades. Dams, railroads, roads, hospitals, schools, they haven't done that. That'll allow the infrastructure to catch up, allow the housing to catch up. The quality of people is also something that's really important. Albanese is telling us that we're bringing in construction workers. That is complete bullshit. The percentage of people amongst our immigrants that are construction workers is 0.6%. They're supposed to build the houses for the other 99.4%. It is crap. the reason Albanese is doing this massive immigration is that we have a per capita recession. So on the basis of per person, we're in recession. So if the only way you can stop that becoming a recession, and then Chalmers being labelled as the treasurer and Albanese the prime minister when the recession occurred, is by bringing in more people to pump up the gross domestic product. That's what it's all about. So that would reduce demand by stopping immigration, pausing immigration, deporting people who are here illegally. Then the other thing about freeing up supply, stop all foreign ownership of housing and farms. Stop it.
Permanently or temporarily?
Permanently. And the Liberal Party and Labor Party have both realised that people are waking up. We have been pushing this, Adam, for about 3 years now, really severely.
So like Indonesia, you can't buy in Indonesia. You can lease the land.
China, you can't.
China, you can't. So you can't own. Can they do leasehold or something, or what's the plan?
No ownership.
No ownership.
No ownership. New Zealand's just done it. When I say just, fairly recently.
Even Australians, I think, in New Zealand have to apply now for owning in New Zealand.
The Canadians have done it. So what we wouldn't say sell overnight. We'd say give them 2 or 3 years to sell. Well, I would say 2 years.
You mean if they own, they have to sell?
Yes.
Even, okay, retrospectively.
If they own it now, they have to sell it.
Wow. Wow.
Do you think that it'd stop for, like, one of the big things that Trump seems to be running on and executing on is getting foreign investment into the USA, getting Japan and all these other countries to invest into the US economy. Do you think that would hurt our Australian economy, stopping foreign investment?
We don't mind in housing.
Bringing housing prices down is one thing, but destroying the economy through a lack of investment.
No,
that far?
We're not opposed to foreign investment. We're opposed to foreign control and ownership.
Do you know any of the numbers around that? Like how much of our property is owned by foreigners?
Housing property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Residential, yeah.
According to the Australian Taxation Office and the Foreign Investment Review Board, it's less than 1%. But it's complete rubbish because the National Australia Bank have done surveys and it's around about 14.9% in New South Wales.
So, okay. So,
and then you've also got real estate agents telling us the same thing.
So your policy would see 15% of residential properties in Australia all of a sudden come onto the market in 2 years?
Over 2 years, yeah. Not overnight, but over 2 years.
That'd bring property prices down, I would say.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. I'm just processing it. Well, it's an interesting idea.
It is a bad thing because it'll crash the economy.
I just know that there's a lot of a lot of Australians' wealth is in property, right? Compared to US.
Yeah, and the banks are holding back lending to small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and just going for the property market.
I think it's interesting because you sort of got a divided nation right now, and so the young people who don't own assets are probably cheering, and the rest of the country who own assets are probably not. But I think Australia does have to make some hard decisions, maybe.
We also want to stop the GST on house construction materials.
That's a great idea.
Which would reduce the cost of housing. Making land more freely available because that's being held back at the moment by some developers, but also by the regulations which are way above what's needed. There was something else I was going to mention in there.
I've got some notes here from the press conference, but I think you've covered most of them. Energy prices was a good one. NDIS, Medicare.
So, Adam, just on energy prices and the excise fall, cutting 26 cents off the cost of a litre of fuel. They're very, very positive because they'll improve productivity and they'll reduce the cost. Energy, and transport and electricity are input costs right across the economy, so they will drop prices. These are not inflationary, but we're putting more money back in people's pockets. Will improve the productivity of the economy, which is generate wealth, not inflation.
Senator Malcolm Roberts, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you and hearing your ideas for the country. And I really just want to say thank you on behalf of us and all the listeners for taking the time to actually have a long form discussion.
Yeah.
And all the work that politicians in this country do. I think it's a tough job and you cop a lot of shit and the pay's not that good. So you must do it and it's really clearly evident here, you do it because you believe in the country and you want to make a better place for us here. I was genuinely surprised by some of the aspects of the conversation, pleasantly and I really enjoyed the chat. So thank you for coming in. Drop a comment, guys, below the video. By engaging in this content, guys, through a like or a comment, it sends a message to other politicians and people of power that, hey, we're paying attention here. We're paying attention to these alternative channels of communication, and we'll get more guests of this quality and caliber into the studio.
And I want to thank you, not only for the invitation, but thank you all for what you're doing. Because as I said, there is nothing more important than freedom of life, but very, very close on the heels. And what makes freedom of life possible is freedom of speech. And the only way to avoid the direct and also the implied censorship of the mouthpiece media, the globalist Big Brother media, is free, independent podcasters, because that's the only way to get real opinions and facts out.
Our pleasure. It's days like this that I feel good about what we're doing. Like we're not.
Yeah, it's education, right? Like in the Australian people, I think the Western world need to be a lot more educated and a lot more interested in politics, because it's not something that's really learned in school.
It's deliberately taken out.
Right. Yeah, and it's not something that, my parents never really gave me the birds and the bees talk about politics. It was basically, hey, my parents voted Liberal, so what do? You vote Liberal. It's exactly what you said, right? You're basically entrenched in that. So I think these pieces are very important, because a lot of people don't realize how much business and politics are intertwined.
Harry Truman said, the former U.S. president, once U.S. president, said, "The only thing new in the world is the history you have not read. It's all happened before." What they do, the globalist curriculum, is to take out civics, which how our political systems work, how democracy works, how the Constitution works, history, because then people are completely ignorant and they don't understand the significance of even voting.
Yep, agree.
That's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Unemployable.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Unemployable. If you'd like to watch another episode, just click there.